It wasn't the first time she slammed the door, but it was the first time she did it with the lock clicking behind me. Dana didn't yell. That wasn't her way. She weaponized calm like other people use knives, swift, precise, leaving you bleeding before you knew you were cut. I stood on their porch with the afternoon sun flattening everything, my fingers still sticky from holding my grandson's juice cup, the one he'd dropped in during our puzzle time. "You're not to come back without calling first," she'd said, her voice measured, clipped. "This is our home now, Russell. You need to respect that." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth wouldn't form words around the knot that had lodged in my throat sometime after the word hour. Inside, I could still hear Tommy's little footsteps, the hum of the cartoon we'd been watching. My son's voice was absent. As usual, I walked down the steps like I had somewhere to go, but I didn't. Not really. Just the dusty rental I'd been in since selling my place after my stroke, trying to be closer to family. Closer had never felt so far. At the corner, I leaned against a utility pole and tried not to let my chest tighten. Plano was loud with heat that day, the kind that made the sidewalks shimmer. The scent of barbecue drifted from someone's backyard, mingling with the hum of lawn mowers and laughter that didn't belong to me. Dana's words looped in my mind, soft as a slap. Respect that. What was I disrespecting, picking Tommy up from preschool, bringing over groceries when I saw their fridge low, fixing the latch on their gate without being asked? I wasn't trying to control them. I was trying to matter. That night I didn't sleep much. The rental felt emptier than usual, its white walls echoing the silence Dana had left in me. I sat by the window and watched their porch light across the cul-de-sac flicker out at 10:14 p.m. sharp. Routine. Neat. Distant. I needed a plan, not revenge, not even confrontation. Presence. I wanted presence. The next morning I made a call to a name I'd scribbled months ago on the back of a receipt, Omar Bright. He'd sold Dana and my son their house 2 years back, knew the neighborhood, the pricing, the rhythms of who moved in and out. When he answered, I skipped the greetings. "Omar, it's Russell Maddox. I'm looking to buy something close." "How close?" "Next door." He whistled. "That's a tight ask, but let me dig." 3 days later, he called back with a chuckle in his voice. "You won't believe it. House 2 doors down is in probate, but the one right next door just listed this morning. Widow moved to a retirement home. House needs work, but it's yours if you move fast. I'll take it. You haven't seen—" "I'll take it." Silence. Then, "I'll get the papers started." The inspection didn't faze me. The porch sagged and the plumbing groaned like an old man in the morning, but I wasn't buying perfection. I was buying proximity. From the front yard, I could see Dana's hydrangeas lining her walkway. I could hear Tommy's voice on the other side of the fence, squealing as he chased bubbles. I didn't wave, not yet, but I stood there, solid, real, impossible to miss. Let her shut the door. I had a key now. It felt like an odd kind of resurrection, getting that brass ring slipped into my palm by Omar, the porch creaking under our feet like it recognized my kind of weight. The house smelled like cedar and dust and time, a widower's place, long emptied of noise but full of memory in the corners. It was smaller than their house. Paint peeled around the windows and the floor slanted slightly in the back hallway. But it stood. I hadn't stood for anything in a while. The first morning I brewed coffee in silence, no TV, no radio. Just me and the sun stretching over the fence, brushing the rim of Dana's second-story window. I caught a glimpse of Tommy bouncing past, a blur in dinosaur pajamas, a half-eaten waffle in hand. He saw me, his face lit up like a match. He pressed both palms against the glass and waved like a maniac. My hand lifted back slow, heavy, but warm. Dana's silhouette stepped in behind him. Her arm lowered the shade. I didn't flinch. I just sat back down, coffee in hand, and started my list. The house needed patching. I needed patching. Maybe we could heal together. That week I cleaned the gutters and replaced the back steps. I patched drywall, recaulked the bathroom sink. Each task was its own kind of therapy, like sandpaper for regret. I didn't listen for their comings and goings, but I noticed them anyway. The exact moment the garage opened each morning, the crinkle of lunch bags through the fence, the back porch light that flicked on precisely at sundown. Dana never looked over, but Tommy did. By Friday, I'd pulled an old bench to the front yard, the one from my old back porch in Garland. I scrubbed it until the wood remembered it was meant to hold people. I sat there each evening, letting the street settle into twilight around me. It was Henrietta Poe, from 2 houses over, who finally cracked the quiet. "You're Maddox," she said, walking up with a paper bag of tomatoes from her garden, and the kind of authority only age can earn, the dad, the one she banned. "I am." She nodded, handed me the bag. "I've got gin if you've got ears," she said. So we talked, or mostly she talked, and I learned. About how Dana ran tight, about how she kept a whiteboard schedule in the kitchen and sanitized the mailbox every other Tuesday, about how my son had stopped smiling so much since the move. "She doesn't like variables," Henrietta said, "and you, Russell Maddox, are a whole damn equation." The next morning I baked banana bread, my wife's old recipe, the kind Tommy liked. I sliced 2 pieces, packed them in wax paper, and left them in a tin on their porch with a note in my chicken scratch hand, for the dinosaur in pajamas. From the bench guy, I didn't expect a response. I didn't get one. But that night, the tin was gone. The next afternoon, as I raked leaves, Tommy's voice floated over the fence. "Grandpa, can I come play?" I looked up. Dana stood behind him, arms folded, mouth set like a locked gate. I raised my rake in a lazy salute. "No rush," I said. "I'll be right here." And I meant it, but meaning something doesn't mean it reaches the person it's meant for. Dana didn't flinch, didn't speak. Just took Tommy by the hand and steered him gently inside, as if my words were traffic she could guide her son around. I didn't take it personally. Not then. I was learning not to. The days blurred into routine, mornings with black coffee on the bench, afternoons sanding the porch railing, evenings fixing the screen door. Henrietta came by most days with gossip and vegetables, the unspoken terms of our strange friendship. She was sharp as a whip and just as quick. "You keep showing up like that, and she's going to build a wall," she said one morning, watching me stain the fence. I dipped the brush again. Let her. "And what's that supposed to do?" "Remind her I'm not going away." She grunted. "You're stubborn. 73 years of it." That night I heard the garage open later than usual. Headlights swung across my driveway as Dana pulled in alone. She paused before getting out, face lit by the glow of the dashboard. I saw her glance toward my porch, then nothing. She turned away, keys jangling, the front door closing behind her like punctuation. 2 days later, Tommy called out again, "Grandpa!" I looked up from where I was planting lavender by the porch. He stood by the side gate, his little hands gripping the slats. "Can I see the lizard again?" He meant the plastic one I kept by the garden gnome, a relic from my garage days with Julian. I hesitated, and then I heard it. Dana's voice, not sharp, not cruel, just flat. "Inside, Tommy." He looked back over his shoulder. I saw the resistance in his spine, the flicker of defiance he must have gotten from his dad, but he went. Still, later that evening, I found the lizard gone. In its place, tucked between the lavender stalks, was a crayon drawing, me and him. 2 stick figures holding hands across a big green square, presumably the fence. No son, no mom, just us. I framed it. By the end of that week, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn 2 doors down, the Jenkins house, vacant since February. I caught Omar checking the lockbox one morning and offered him iced tea. "Didn't expect you to still be standing," he said, half smiling. I sipped. "Didn't expect you to care." He looked over at Dana's place. "That woman's got ice in her veins, man. She's scared." "Of you?" "No. Of losing control." He nodded slowly. "You going to sell and move again?" I shook my head. "No. I'm going to stay right here, long enough for her to remember I'm not the enemy." And something must have shifted, because the next week I caught Dana pausing at her mailbox, Tommy tugging at her coat. Our eyes met. Not long, just enough. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Later that night, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find no one, just a Tupperware container on my mat, warm to the touch, steam fogging the lid. Beef stew, my son's favorite. No note, no explanation. I carried it inside, placed it on the counter, and didn't touch it for an hour. Just stood there, letting the scent fill the room like something remembered, something forgiven. I didn't eat it right away. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to, like it might vanish if I peeled back the lid too fast. That stew sat on my counter like an apology too tender to speak aloud. I eventually warmed it slowly, not out of caution, but reverence. And when I tasted it, sweet carrots, soft beef, thyme, just like Marie used to use, I knew it was Dana's cooking. I knew because Julian never learned, and Tommy didn't yet care. That meant she remembered what I liked. Or maybe she remembered Julian liking it as a boy. Either way, it was a message. I cleaned the Tupperware and returned it 2 days later, setting it on their porch with no note, no knock. Just a spoon tucked inside. We never talked about it. But a few nights later, Tommy came to the fence again, this time with a plastic bag. "Mom said you forgot these," he said, pushing the bag through a loose slat. Inside were 3 photos I hadn't seen in years. Me and Julian fishing at White Rock Lake, Tommy on my shoulders at the Plano Balloon Fest, and one of Marie, sitting on the porch with a bowl of peaches in her lap, laughing mid-sentence. My breath caught somewhere between memory and gratitude. She said you might want them back. "I do," I said. "Very much." Tommy beamed. "Want to see my rock collection?" Before I could answer, Dana's voice came from inside. "Tommy, time for bath." He rolled his eyes and waved. "Next time." And then he was gone. But the photo stayed in my hands, and that night I framed the one of Marie. I put it on my mantel beside a brass lamp and an old metronome. Her smile held the room together. Henrietta dropped by the next morning, armed with cantaloupe and questions. "You two playing postal service now?" I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. "Good," she said, sitting down hard on my porch bench, "because that boy deserves to know he comes from more than polite silence." I nodded, slicing the melon, the juice sweet on my fingers. "You ever think about what you'd say to her if you could only say one thing?" I asked. "To Dana?" "No, to Marie." Henrietta didn't blink. I'd say, "You were right about the tomatoes, and I never told you enough that your hands were beautiful." We sat with that. Then she added, "You?" I'd say thank you and sorry in that order. The following week brought a break in the weather, cool mornings and soft skies. Tommy came by more often now, sometimes with drawings, sometimes just to tell me what he had for lunch. I never invited him over the fence, but he always looked at it like it might vanish if he stared long enough. One morning, Dana opened her front door and lingered. "Tommy," she called, "ask if he wants to come to your school recital." Tommy's eyes widened. He looked at me like he couldn't believe he got to be the messenger. "You want to, Grandpa?" I stood slowly, heart thudding like a second chance. I'd be honored. Dana didn't meet my eyes, but she didn't shut the door either. At the recital, I sat in the second row. Dana was beside Julian, hands folded tightly in her lap. When Tommy's class walked on stage in paper hats and crooked smiles, she leaned just slightly in my direction. "He's nervous," she murmured. I replied, quiet as a prayer, "He won't be, once he sees us." And when Tommy caught sight of us, his face split wide with joy. For that moment, we were a family again. And then the moment passed, softly, the way a candle burns down without flickering, no drama, no sudden chill. Just the quiet return of distance, like gravity taking back its claim. After the recital, there was no invitation to dinner, no hug from Dana. Just a polite nod, a thank you murmured like an afterthought. Julian clapped me on the shoulder, but his eyes darted sideways as if worried it might be too much, too noticeable. Tommy waved until I disappeared around the corner of the school. That was enough. I walked home alone. Plano was lit gold by the late sun, the way it sometimes gets in October, honeyed and forgiving. My house greeted me with silence, the kind I used to dread but now handled like an old coat. Worn, familiar, necessary. I made tea and sat by the window. Across the lawn, Dana's living room glowed with lamplight. I saw her pass through it, carrying laundry, hair tied up. Ordinary things. But to me, extraordinary. Because I wasn't banned anymore, I wasn't welcome yet, not truly, but I was seen. And sometimes being seen is the first thread you pull when you want to unravel resentment. A week later, Henrietta rang my bell with her crooked smile and a stack of old photo albums under her arm. "I've been thinking," she said, "if we're all just waiting to be remembered, maybe we should start the remembering ourselves." We spent the afternoon with brittle pages and fading ink, pictures of her with her husband, Henry, in front of old Chevys and diners and community choirs. Her wedding dress looked like whipped cream in effort. "You miss him?" I asked gently. "Every day," she said, but not with sadness, with recognition. I nodded, not fully understanding, but wanting to. That evening, I found a folded note in my mailbox. No envelope, just my name in Dana's tidy handwriting. It read, "Tommy's birthday party is Saturday at 2 backyard. Just family." I stared at the words longer than I should have, as if they might dissolve. Just family. I didn't know if it was an olive branch or a test, but I baked a peach cobbler like Marie used to, using her recipe card, creased, smudged, unmistakably hers. I wrapped it in a red gingham towel and walked it over at 5 minutes to 2. Dana opened the gate without hesitation. Julian waved from the grill, tongs in hand. Tommy shrieked when he saw me and dragged me to the table where he'd arranged dinosaur party hats and juice boxes like centerpieces. It was simple, no magic. Just cousins running through sprinklers, paper plates, music on low. But Dana let me sit. Next to her. She didn't speak much, but when the sun dipped lower and the kids tired out, she said quietly, "He's lucky to have you." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "You're doing a good job." She blinked at that, not because she doubted it, but maybe because she hadn't expected it from me. When I got home that night, I found a paper bag on my porch. Inside was a crayon drawing. Tommy's again. Me, Dana, Julian, and him. 4 stick figures, holding hands. No fence. I pinned it to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cowboy boot, right next to a grocery list I no longer cared about. That little drawing, crooked and bright, felt more permanent than any picture frame. It was hope in marker, pure and unfiltered. But something shifted after that, not in Tommy, in Dana. She was quieter, not cold, but cautious, like a person who steps onto a once-cracked bridge and doesn't trust the repairs yet. She still waved, still nodded, still returned containers when I sent over banana bread or leftover chili. But her face grew tighter in the mornings, especially when Julian wasn't home. One Tuesday I saw her loading the car, hair still damp, Tommy half-dressed and protesting. "Want help?" I asked, stepping halfway across my lawn. She paused, car keys in hand, gaze locked onto mine. "No, we're good," she said too quickly, then softer. "Thanks, though." I nodded, but I felt the wall again, not the fence, the invisible one. Later that week, Julian came by. He didn't warn me, just knocked, carrying a six-pack and the kind of weariness I hadn't seen in him since his college days. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Course." We sat on the porch. He handed me a beer, opened one for himself, then exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "She's overwhelmed," he said. "Work's been brutal. She's juggling everything. I travel too much. She's trying, Dad. I know she is. She told me. She still feels like you're watching, like you're waiting to pounce." That stung, but not because it was untrue. "Am I doing something wrong?" I asked. Julian took a long sip. "Not exactly, but maybe too much right, too fast." I turned the bottle in my hands. "I'm not trying to invade, son, just trying to show I still exist." "I know." and I'm glad you're close. But give her space. Let her come around in her own time." I stared out across the yard where Henrietta's begonias were blooming in a riot of pink. "She invited me," I said quietly. "To Tommy's party, to the recital. That meant something." "It did," Julian agreed. "But even good changes can feel like pressure." We didn't talk much more after that, just sat there, beer growing warm in our hands, the night settling in. The next morning I didn't wave. I didn't send muffins. I just sat on my bench and let the world go by. Dana glanced over once, her face unreadable. I looked away first. I busied myself with repairs I'd been putting off, gutters, weather stripping, repainting the mailbox. I filled my hours with small things, hoping they'd stitch the bigger ache closed, Henrietta noticed. "You look like a man rehearsing for distance," she said, peeling an orange beside me. "I'm trying to do what he asked." "And is it making you feel honest?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't want to be distant. I wanted to knock on her door and say, "I've been here the whole time, waiting for you to stop seeing me as a threat." But that wasn't how healing worked. So instead, I planted sunflowers right along the fence, tall ones, bright. Too bold to ignore, they wouldn't bloom for weeks, but I didn't mind. I had time. And every time I watered them, I imagined her in her kitchen, watching through the high blinds, wondering what I was up to. I hope she saw the care. I hope she saw the patience. But mostly, I hope she saw what Tommy saw, that I wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't. Through the heavy heat of Texas spring, through the whip of sudden rainstorms and the gnats that gathered like tiny judges, I stayed put, watering those sunflowers, repairing the trim, living a quiet life 50 feet from the one I used to be part of. The day they bloomed was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just finished repainting the porch swing, and when I stepped down the front stairs, there they were, 6 golden crowns opening toward the sky like praise. I stood still for a long time, paintbrush dangling at my side, heart louder than the breeze. I didn't hear the footsteps at first. "Grandpa?" Tommy stood at the edge of his yard, backpack still slung over one shoulder, his eyes wide. "They're taller than me." "They're supposed to be," I said. "Sunflowers reach for the sun." "Can I pick one?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Just one." He darted through the gate before I could blink, careful and delighted, choosing the thickest stalk and wrapping both arms around it like a prize. When he yanked, the flower bent stubbornly before finally giving way with a satisfying pop. He handed it to me. "No," I said. "You picked it? It's yours." He grinned. "I'm going to put it in Mom's room." And just like that, he ran off. I stood there with dirt still under my nails, not knowing what to do with the lump in my throat. That evening, I was in the garage sorting screws when Julian walked in without knocking. "She told me," he said, arms folded, voice unreadable. "Told you what?" "That you planted them for her." I raised an eyebrow. "I planted them for Tommy." Julian tilted his head. "But you knew she'd see them." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. "She liked it," he added. "The flower on her dresser. She said it reminded her of something good she couldn't quite name." That night, I wrote Marie's name in the dirt behind the sunflower bed with my finger. Just once. Just to mark the memory. The next morning, Dana knocked. She didn't wait for me to open the screen door. "Coffee?" she asked, holding a thermos and 2 cups. I nodded. "Bench okay?" We sat side by side, not quite close enough to touch. "You've been quiet," she said. "I was told to give space." She sipped, thoughtful. "I'm not great with space. I confuse it with silence. And silence, to me, always feels like disapproval." I glanced at her. "I never disapproved. I just didn't know where I fit." "You fit," she said, eyes fixed ahead. I just didn't know how to say it. We sat that way a while, the weight between us slowly shifting. "I lost my mother young," she said quietly. "Everything since then has been about holding the structure together, making sure nothing cracked. That's a heavy job," she nodded. "And you came in and brought feeling, messy, real feeling. It scared me. I didn't mean to. I know, but now I think maybe it's what we needed." We didn't hug. That wasn't our language yet, but before she left, she turned to me and said, "Next week's Tommy's field day. He wants you there, not as a guest, as his team captain." I couldn't speak. She smiled. "I told him you'd say yes." And she was right. Of course I said yes. Field day came with blaring whistles, neon-colored shirts, and the kind of chaos only a schoolyard full of sugared-up kids can create. The grass was uneven, damp in patches from last night's sprinkler cycle, and the sky was already threatening sweat before 10 a.m. I wore a blue T-shirt with Team Tommy in black marker across the front, Dana's idea. When she handed it to me, folded and still warm from the dryer, she looked me in the eye and said, "He'll remember this for the rest of his life." And I thought, so will I. Tommy ran toward me like I was the quarterback of his dreams. He wrapped his arms around my waist and then dragged me into a circle of second graders, all limbs and freckles and shy hellos. I hadn't felt this necessary in years. Julian showed up midway through the sack race. He wasn't wearing a team shirt, just khakis and a tucked-in polo, phone holstered to his belt, but he cheered when Tommy jumped the last cone, and for that brief flash we were aligned, father, son, grandson, like notes in a chord. Dana stood near the water table, arms crossed loosely, smiling. When the medals were handed out, cheap plastic things on striped ribbon, I placed Tommy's around his neck and whispered, "You made me proud today." He beamed. "You too, Grandpa." Later, after the trophies were packed up and the kids loaded into minivans sticky with juice boxes, Dana walked over and placed a hand on my arm. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting him love you the way he needs to, not the way I was ready for." That stayed with me all weekend. I didn't see her the next few days. Life resumed its quiet rhythm. Henrietta dropped off cucumbers, I cleaned out the attic, the sunflowers began to droop with age. But the change had settled into the bones of our street. There was an ease now. One morning as I sipped coffee on my porch, I heard the screen door next door open. Dana stepped out, then stopped short when she saw me. We both laughed. "Same schedule, huh?" she called. "Retirement's full of patterns." She took a step closer. I was thinking of repainting the guest room. It still smells like Julian's middle school gym socks. I chuckled. "Strong vintage." "I could use help choosing a color," she said, "if you're up for it." "I've got opinions," I replied, "and a color wheel." The project took longer than it should have, not because the room was big, but because we talked between coats, about Tommy, about Marie, about what it felt like to build a life from pieces you never meant to arrange this way. "I kept trying to make this house mine," Dana said. Paint roller paused mid-stroke. "But it never felt settled. Not till now." "You never had to do it alone," I said. "I thought if I let anyone in, I'd lose what I had. And now?" She looked at the pale green walls we'd chosen together. "Now it feels like sharing, not surrender." That night, Julian stopped by. He looked at the walls, then at us, and said simply, "Looks good." Dana smiled. "It finally does." When I returned home, I sat on the porch long after the sun had set. The fence was still there, but it no longer divided. It marked two homes that breathed the same rhythm. The silence in my house wasn't loneliness. It was mine. It took time to understand that distinction. For years I had filled silence with noise, news stations, old records, the clatter of too many spoons in the sink, as though if I could just stay loud enough, I wouldn't hear the echo of what was missing. Now I didn't rush to mute the quiet. I let it unfold. I let it breathe. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch with nothing but the hum of cicadas and the rustle of Dana's wind chimes next door, and it felt like company, not absence. One evening, Henrietta brought over lemon bars and a puzzle. "I'm sick of my own coffee table," she declared, "and your lamplight's softer." We pieced together a barn scene in slow, satisfied silence. Somewhere around fitting a tiny cow's tail to its body, she said, "You've softened, Russell." I glanced up. "Not gone mushy," she clarified, grinning. "Just unarmored." I didn't deny it. After Henrietta left, I found myself pulling down old boxes from the hallway closet, things I hadn't touched since Marie passed. A tin of concert tickets, her sewing kit, a half-finished scarf in autumn tones. I wrapped it around my shoulders and stood at the mirror. She'd meant to give it to Julian, but maybe it was meant for me now. The next morning I set out folding chairs for a blockyard sale. Plano in spring had a way of making people sociable. Dana and I placed our signs together, hers in careful Sharpie block letters, mine crooked but earnest. Tommy sold lemonade, 75 cents. $1 if you're smiling, he'd add. We laughed more that day than we had in months. At one point Dana held up an old lawn gnome from my table. Really, Russell? This guy? Hey, Greg. The gnome guarded 3 lawns. He's earned his pension. She shook her head. I'm buying him, but only to rescue the neighborhood aesthetic. Later, as we packed up, she leaned against the car and said, we should do this more. What, junk trading? No, laughing. And that's when I smiled. Fully, not politely, not cautiously. That night I walked into the guest room, the one we'd painted, and stood in the middle, unsure what I was looking for. It smelled faintly of eucalyptus and sawdust. I grabbed a book from the shelf, one of Tommy's, accidentally left behind. It was called How to Be a Hero. I sat on the bed and opened it. Inside the front cover was a drawing. Crayons again, but this time it wasn't just us as a family. It was me, standing tall, holding Greg the gnome in one hand and Tommy on my shoulders. Above me, in bold red letters, he'd written, My grandpa is my hero. I sat with that for a long time. Not crying, just still. Grateful. Later, I left the drawing on the fridge, replaced the old grocery list at last, and when I turned out the lights, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full in a new way. Quiet. Sure. Like something had finally come home. It wasn't just a feeling, it was rhythm. A new kind. One that let my days stretch gently instead of crumpling under the weight of expectation or regret. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. One Thursday, I heard a knock at the back door. Not the front, the back, the family door. Tommy stood there, clutching a shoebox like it held a treasure map. Can we build something? He asked. Just us? I cleared the kitchen table. Inside the box, scraps of wood, bottle caps, paper towel tubes, string, bits and ends, the kind of things a child sees as possibility. What are we building? He shrugged. A rocket or a trap or a museum? I laughed. All 3? Maybe. We worked in slow concentration. I let him lead. I handed tools, tied knots, let glue dry crooked. When the sun dipped low, Dana knocked once and poked her head in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Tommy waved her off. We're doing architecture. She smiled, then turned to me. I was wondering, do you want to come with us this weekend? Tommy's got a soccer scrimmage in Addison. After we're doing lunch. I blinked. Not because she asked, but because she asked so easily. I'd love that, I said. She nodded, lingered a second, then stepped back out. Tommy didn't even pause in his project. She wants you around more. Does she say that? No, but she smiles different now. That Saturday I rode with them, Dana driving, Julian riding shotgun, Tommy and me in the back. It should have been awkward, the car too quiet, the music too low. But it wasn't. There was space, and we filled it carefully. The field in Addison was bright and wide. Julian shouted encouragements that made Tommy roll his eyes. Dana paced the sidelines. I just clapped. Every time Tommy kicked the ball, whether toward a goal or a tree, I clapped. At lunch, we sat outside under an umbrella that flapped in the breeze. Dana ordered for everyone, like she always had. Julian reached across and brushed salt off her fries, and for the first time, I wasn't looking in from the outside. I was in the picture. Not edited in, not photoshopped, just there. After the plates cleared and the check was paid, Julian leaned back, stretching. You remember when Mom used to pack peanut butter sandwiches with the crust still on? He asked, looking at me. Of course, said the crusts made you taller. Dana chuckled. He still won't eat them. Julian gave me a look, half teasing, half soft. She was the tough one. You were always the quietly stubborn one. That's still true, Dana said, sipping her tea. They were smiling. At each other. At me. The drive home was full of tired yawns and sun-drunk quiet. When we pulled into the driveway, Tommy whispered, "This was the best day." And I believed him. Back in my kitchen, I stood staring at the rocket trap museum we'd left unfinished. It looked ridiculous and perfect. I didn't move it. That evening, I found an envelope in the mailbox. Inside, a folded note from Dana. Simple handwriting. "Thank you for staying even when I pushed. No signature, none needed." I pinned it beside the drawing on the fridge. The corner fluttered every time the door opened, like it was waving at me. Later, as the porch light flickered on, I heard laughter from their yard, not loud, just real. It didn't need me anymore, but it wanted me. And that difference, thin as breath, made everything feel lighter. Like the years of proving myself had settled into something more honest, mutual, unwritten, solid. But peace is delicate. It doesn't shout when it arrives, and it doesn't warn when it's threatened. It started on a Tuesday, again, always Tuesdays, with a knock I didn't expect. Julian, face stiff. Tie still crooked from work. "Can we talk?" he said. I stepped aside. He didn't sit. "She's worried," he began, "about how close things have gotten." I blinked. "You mean Dana?" He nodded. "It's not bad, just fast. She's afraid we're shifting too much, too soon." "We're not shifting," I said slowly. "We're adjusting. She said Tommy cries when he can't see you, that he asks why you don't pick him up from school, why you aren't there every dinner." "He's 7, I replied. "That's not confusion. That's affection." Julian paced near the bookshelf, one hand at the back of his neck. "She's afraid," he said again, softer this time. "Afraid of losing her shape in all this." I sighed. "Do you feel that way?" "No," he said, then paused. "But I understand it." There was a long silence. "What are you asking me to do?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just ease back a little. Be present, but not pivotal." I looked past him, through the window to their yard, where Tommy's bike lay half-tipped on the lawn. I thought about our projects, the field day, the sunflower stalk still standing like a sentinel between our homes. "I see," I said. "You want me to go invisible again?" "No," he said. "Just not essential." That word stung in a place I hadn't felt in a while. He left soon after. No hug this time. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting things I could let go of, the porch chats, the walks to the school, the half-finished rocket museum, the way Dana had started waving with both hands instead of one. The next day, I stayed inside. No porch coffee, no fence peeking. I trimmed my nails, cleaned the silverware drawer, rearranged the books. By Friday, Dana texted, "You okay?" I didn't answer. That weekend, Henrietta caught me on the sidewalk. "You look like a man who's been benched." Something like that. She tilted her head. "Don't be dramatic. You're still in the game, just maybe not quarterback." I thought I was finally part of something again. She patted my arm. "You are. But part of something doesn't mean central to everything. There's a difference. And if they push me out again? Then you build your own fire and let them come to it." I chewed on that all afternoon. Sunday came with rain. I watched it through the front window, unsure what I was waiting for. At dusk there was a knock. Tommy, soaked and breathless. "Why aren't you coming over any more?" he asked, eyes wide with confusion. I crouched, a towel in hand. Sometimes grown-ups get scared, even when things are going well. Of what? Of needing someone too much. He thought about that, then frowned. "But needing someone is good." I smiled. "You're right." I dried his hair, and he stood still for it. Then he looked up and said, "I made something, but I didn't finish it, because I needed your hands." That nearly broke me. "I'll be over tomorrow," I said. "Tell your mom I miss her banana bread." He grinned, already running home. That night I sat on the porch again. The light was soft, and I wasn't going anywhere. That Monday morning I rose before the sun. The house was still, the way I liked it best, a mug of coffee in my hand, steam curling in the dim kitchen light. I stood at the back door, watching the gray hint of dawn slide over Dana's rooftop. I didn't move toward it. I didn't knock or wave or call Tommy's name. Instead, I sat on my own porch swing and waited. Just before 8, the back door opened. Tommy stepped out, dressed for school, his backpack twice the size of his torso. He scanned the yard. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. He didn't wave. He just lifted the half-finished rocket trap high in the air and then pointed at me with it like a signal flare. Behind him, Dana appeared. She followed his gaze and spotted me. There was a pause, and then she lifted one hand in a quiet wave. I returned it. Later that afternoon, as promised, I walked next door. Dana greeted me at the door with a quiet smile and a set of paintbrushes. "Change of plans," she said. "Tommy wants to repaint the rocket in metallics. He says it needs to shine." I chuckled. "Shining is important." We worked at the kitchen table again, the three of us. Metallic silver went on unevenly but brightly. Tommy insisted the gnome get strapped to the nose of the rocket as its pilot. Greg, the astronaut. Dana let out the kind of laugh that can't be faked. It filled the room. After Tommy went to bed, I stayed to help clean up. The brushes were crusted with glitter and ambition. As I dried my hands, Dana leaned against the counter, arms folded. "He told me about your porch talk," she said. "He's wiser than we are." She looked down. Julian was scared of being eclipsed, of losing what little space he had with his son. "I understand," I said. "But the answer isn't making the world smaller. It's learning how to share the light." She met my eyes. "You're not the same man who moved in next door. Neither are you." There was a pause. "Julian's getting transferred," she said softly. 3-month assignment in Houston. My chest tightened. "You're staying?" She nodded. "Tommy's school, my job. It all fits better here." "And me?" She smiled gently. "You're part of the fit now." I left the house with a full heart and paint still on my sleeves. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, Julian stopped by. Alone. No warning. He looked tired. His shirt was untucked. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He sat at my kitchen table like he used to when he was a teenager with a broken bike or a bad report card. "I was wrong," he said. I didn't interrupt. I thought I was losing something, but I wasn't. I was just afraid you'd take my place. "You're his father," I said. "That place doesn't get taken." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Thank you for not backing down, for staying." "I did it for all of us." We sat in silence. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a folded photograph. Tommy, me, Dana, Julian, at field day. All of us laughing, sunlit and unaware. On the back, a note in Julian's handwriting. "Let's not lose this again." I stood, walked to the fridge, pinned it beside Tommy's drawing and Dana's note. Then I turned back to him and said, "We won't." And I meant it. That promise lingered in the air, sweet and slow like the scent of honeysuckle after dusk. I carried it with me into spring, into weekends with Tommy, quiet afternoons with Donna, and even into long porch talks with Henrietta, who'd begun to stay later than usual, her laugh lingering longer too. One Saturday she arrived with a small brown paper bag and a peculiar grin. "I found this at the resale shop," she said. "Thought of you." Inside, a worn harmonica in a cracked leather case. "Used to play?" she asked. "Long time ago," I said, cradling it in my palm. "Well, no time like now." The first note came out weak, dry as dust, but the second warbled with something resembling memory. Henrietta clapped once and said, "There he is." We sat on the porch and I played. Nothing fancy, just old folk lines I half remembered. A few neighbors slowed their walks to listen. One clapped, another smiled. I started playing most evenings, and people started coming. By June, Henrietta brought her folding chair without asking. The Murphys down the street dropped off lemonade. A teenage girl from 3 doors over brought her violin once, then came back every Friday. We weren't loud, but we were present. One Sunday afternoon, Dana came by with banana bread and a question in her eyes. "Would you be interested," she asked, "in helping with a community potluck? Tommy's school is raising funds." "I can bring music," I offered. "You'd be the highlight," she said. The event took place in the park between our houses, picnic tables, handmade flyers, paper lanterns strung between trees. I played soft blues under the oaks. The teenager played along. Henrietta tapped a plastic tambourine. Tommy collected tickets for lemonade, proudly wearing a volunteer sticker. At one point, Dana stood beside me, arms folded, watching the small crowd. "This is what I wanted," she said. "A neighborhood, a net." Julian flew in from Houston that weekend. He arrived at the tail end of the potluck and watched me play from a distance before walking over. "You've built something here," he said. "It's beautiful." I handed him the harmonica. "You still remember that camp song?" He laughed. Poorly. He joined in anyway. Tommy lit up like a firecracker. 3 generations, 1 melody. Slightly off-key, but joyful. Later that night, as the tables cleared and the kids ran wild in the twilight, Dana approached again. "There's talk," she said, "of turning this into a monthly thing." "I'll be here," I said. She looked around at the people gathering chairs, sweeping crumbs, hugging goodbye. "You know," she said, "when you bought the house next door, I thought it was an invasion." "I know. But now," she continued, "it feels like an anchor." Henrietta, overhearing, leaned over with a smile. "Told you his lamplight was softer." We laughed, all 3 of us. As the sun set, I returned home and stood at my fence. Greg the gnome, still seated proudly in the garden rocket, watched over both yards like a sentinel. The light spilled from their kitchen window to mine. No borders, just bridges. I closed the door behind me and thought, I was never trying to haunt them. I just needed them to see me. Now they did, and I saw them. Fully, clearly, gratefully. The idea came from Henrietta, as most of the best ones did. "You got this empty yard," she said, waving her hand at my patchy back lawn. "Why not make something of it?" I squinted. "Like what?" "Something that grows," she said. "Something rooted." That stuck with me. By August, the plan was in motion. Raised beds, stone paths, a few benches, a trellis. A quiet space, open to anyone who needed it. Tommy dubbed it Grandpa's Garden. Dana called it her morning piece. Julian, on leave again, offered to build the bench with me. We sweated through a Saturday staining wood and leveling soil. He handed me nails like it was second nature, like there hadn't been a stretch of years where we'd barely spoken unless required. "Still got it," he said, tapping the bench seat when we were done. "So do you," I replied. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he added, "I told my boss I might transfer back." I turned to him, unsure what I'd heard. "Things feel clearer now. I want to be around, not just visiting." I didn't say anything, just clapped a hand on his shoulder. Henrietta donated 3 potted roses for the garden's entrance. "Every good place needs a threshold," she said, "and a little fragrance." The night we finished, Dana and Tommy joined us for lemonade on the new bench. The garden wasn't flashy, just wood, soil, a few stones and colors beginning to bloom. But it felt like arrival. A week later, I hosted an open-yard evening, lanterns strung from trellis to tree, chairs in a loose half-circle. I played the harmonica. The violin girl returned. Henrietta hummed backup. Tommy passed cookies like a professional. Neighbors came not to gawk, to belong. After the music faded, Dana took my arm and walked with me to the porch. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I shook my head. "This is sanctuary." I looked around. At the garden lights, the shadows of new flowers, the fence that no longer felt like a barrier. "I think you're right," I said. The next morning I received a letter from the city. Henrietta had quietly submitted a request to name the garden the Maddox Peace Garden. "Sounds fancy," I told her. "You've earned it," she said. We planted a small plaque together by the roses. Tommy helped polish the brass with his sleeve. By autumn, Julian had signed the transfer. They were staying, and it no longer felt like I was next door to my family. It felt like I was finally in the center of it. One Saturday morning, I stepped out with my coffee and found Tommy already in the garden, sitting on the bench, drawing something. "What are you working on?" "A map," he said, "of everything we built." He held it up. Little trees, the rocket gnome, the porch, even Henrietta's umbrella. "Looks like a whole world," I said. He nodded. "It is." I let him finish in silence, just watching. The sun caught the roses. A breeze swept through the trellis. I looked back at the house. My house. Their house. No separation anymore, just continuity. The past had its place, but it didn't own me anymore. And the future. The future was still soft, still open. But it smelled like rosemary and rosewood. And it was mine. Mornings became quieter, but not lonely. I woke to the sound of sprinklers and sparrows. The garden, once a patch of bare soil and hopeful intentions, now held shape, color, memory. I'd sit on the bench each day with my coffee, watching the light change over the roses Henrietta planted. Even on the gray days, something about the space reminded me I had chosen this, not out of spite or escape, but presence. Return. Henrietta came less often now. Her knees gave her trouble, and her daughter insisted on more checkups. But when she did appear, wrapped in cardigans and her wide-rimmed hat, she always asked the same question first. "What did you learn this week, Russell?" The answers varied. 1 week. That you can't overwater mint, but you can smother it with worry. Another. That letting go doesn't mean forgetting, just loosening your grip. Today. That roots can take hold even in shallow soil if the sun is steady. She smiled. That's one worth writing down. Tommy had taken to drawing murals in chalk across the sidewalk. Every Saturday a new story. Rockets.gardens. Dinosaurs eating pancakes. Sometimes he included me, always tall, always smiling. One morning Dana found me in the yard watching him sketch. "I saw the new one," she said. "You've got a cape now." "Super Grandpa," I said, "retired mostly." She laughed. "He's happy, more than I've seen in a long time. I know the feeling." She looked at the house. "Julian's thinking of starting a music class at the community center, for kids and families. Wouldn't have seen that coming. He says it's your fault. Said you reminded him it was okay to take up space." I smiled quietly. That night I opened the old memory box under my bed. I hadn't touched it since the move. Inside, faded photos, ticket stubs, notes in my late wife's handwriting. One said simply, "Make it count." I laid it on the bench the next morning next to a sprig of rosemary, no words, just presence. Neighbors still stopped by. The harmonica made appearances. The violin girl, now 17, played a duet with me at the harvest fair. We won a pie for it. In late November, Henrietta passed. Peacefully, they said, in her sleep. Her daughter asked if we could host a small memorial in the garden. We did. The roses were just fading, but their scent lingered. Tommy read a poem. Dana baked. Julian played a slow tune on a borrowed guitar. I spoke last. She saw things, I said, before they bloomed, and she believed we could be softer, kinder, even when the world asked us not to be. I touched the trellis as I stepped down. The wind carried something warm with it. I swore I could hear her say, "Write that one down, too." That evening, I added a plaque beneath the roses, Henrietta Poe. She believed things could bloom, and then they did. Winter came gently, not bitter, not rushed. Lights in both houses glowed early. The fence remained, but only in wood, never in spirit. One morning Tommy crawled onto the bench beside me, head on my shoulder. "Will you still live here when I'm big?" "I'll be wherever you need me. But I want you next door, then I will be." He smiled, eyes closing. I let the silence stretch, thick and kind. Later that week, Dana brought over a photo book, one she'd made. It was titled Roots and Wings. Inside, all of us, laughing, building, crying, blooming. I closed it slowly. I had been the outsider, the exile. Now I was the garden keeper, the porch player, the neighbor, the grandfather, and I had made it count